Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lena Struwe, talking about from vasculums to iPhones, the history of field research tools, and the stories herbarium specimens tell us.
I am going to talk to you about the history of field tools from vasculums to iPhones. So I've been interested in how the tools of the trade have changed over time. So from Linnaeus or pre-Linnaeus, but the tools that were used to collect all the specimens that are in our herbaria and that we have used to get to places, survive in places, and also, get the plants that we want back to us. So now it's very dark here. Sorry about that. So these tools, I'm going to tell you a story about, what has been used, how they have been used, what is not used anymore, and what are the living fossils in our cars and our bags that we're bringing with us when we go out, and what are the key innovations, and also what are the things that are new that we now take for granted that people didn't have in the past. So this is The Botanist, the cover image for Maxwell Parrish from 1908. So look at this botanist, looking at a plant. He looks very unhappy, but he has a vasculum carrying behind his back and probably some kind of pressing material in a magnifying glass. So this is how botanists were viewed by the public at this time. They were also viewed in other ways. So here is a painting called The Botanist. And you can see that there's a vasculum there too, behind him. And he's using his cane to reach out to get some very, very special aquatic plant of some kind in there. And he's about to fall in a second, right? So this is, again, the vasculum is like this key tool that was used in the past. So what are vasculums? Vasculums are metal kind of boxes, often rounded, so you could carry them in your field behind, with a strap around your shoulder. And these vasculums, you open them and you had an big opening to them. Sometimes there was a little small area with a second lid where you could keep your sandwich or where you could put the mosses. So keep them separate. But you could take a wet kitchen towel, and you took that wet kitchen towel, you collected your plants and rolled it up in this moist kitchen towel and put it into the vasculum, and they would be fresh when you came home, and you could press them in your plant press, because carrying a plant press is big and not very easy to do. You can see this 1893 print. You also have a vasculum, so this little, boy that is holding a butterfly and have a net and a vasculum. So typical naturalist of the time. These vasculum images I have here are all vasculums that are on sale on eBay. And usually these are pretty expensive, so at least $100, many more if they're painted and beautiful. So these are considered collectible items. Here, the first thing you need to have, of course, is that you need to see, have plants to look at. So in the beginning, you have to go outside and find plants. This is an outdoor class in botany from Library of Congress from 1899. Here, the kids are out looking at plants somewhere in Washington, D.C. So you start when you're young, to look at plants. But plants is the primary thing. So that's, if you don't have plants, then that doesn't work well. Then you have to navigate. And I have to stop here. Is there any way I can get rid of the zoom thing on top? Because I cannot see my slide titles. Can you see the slide titles? Sarah, can you do something about that?
Lena, you can actually just take the navigation, that bar, and just move it to the side or something, but that's the best I can do for you.
Okay, put it at the bottom then, because at the bottom there's less. Yeah, if it could have been on this side, that would be better, but that doesn't work. It only works on the bottom or the top, right? It doesn't work. Okay, let's just move it to the bottom then. As far down as so it's blocking my slides. Not sure why that is, but
if I figure something out, I'll let you know.
Okay, well, it's better so that you can at least see the titles. So to get the place to find your plants, you need to know where you're going. So if you're Lewis and Clark, that's the map, the top map is the Lewis and Clark map. You don't know where you're going. You just know that you have somehow to get from the east to the west, and this is the resulting map of your explorations. Per Kalm came to New Jersey, and then later he moved northwards upwards towards the Canadian border at the time. And he also hired Native Americans, just like Lewis and Clark, to help him find a way and get around with various places. And at the bottom, you have a modern map, a modern topographic map from USGS that nowadays we have these good maps, many of them that are made from satellite images and that have real topographic elevation lines, but that was not possible until, rather recently. Also today, we have GPS. Not many of us maybe are using the GPS modules anymore. We have it on our phones, but in some places where you don't have cell phone towers, you're going to have to use satellite-based GPS. Of course, in the past, we all had various kinds of compasses. People knew how to use a compass. That's something that you still have to do if you're in areas where there's no places. I'm trying to get rid of these. Can I get rid of? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so next. How do you get to these places? So you have to have various tools to get yourself transported to these places, unless you're children that are going out for a school trip, in the schoolyard or just locally. So you have examples from the past where, for example, Schomburg in the 1830s was in northern South America, and he hired native people to be porters, to carry him, his stuff, all his enormous amount of, tools and collections in these canoes. This is at the Christmas Cataracts, which are falls on the Orinoco River, if I remember correctly, in Venezuela, and a painting of that. So obviously there's no photography at the time, so this is a depiction of how it was remembered or how it could have looked like. And then you have C.G. Pringle's self-portrait from Mexico, 1884. He's sitting there waiting without his horse. Something has happened. Somebody left to go maybe get something and come back later, and hopefully somebody is coming back and he's not just left there alone. You can see the presses in the front of the wagon there. And at the bottom, I put that in there because this is John Torrey and Asa Gray went out to the Rockies. This is in Colorado, and this is the Torrey Peak and the Gray's Peak, named after those two botanists, and they went there by train. So train was another way of getting around to collect plants. And today, we also have another way to find out where you're going to go, and this is from Joe Orsenholt, who is in charge of the New Jersey Flora Project. He gave me these images of using LiDAR. So LiDAR is a kind of like a radar thing where you see ups and downs in the landscape that you can't see from a regular satellite photo. This is a piece of New Jersey. It looks like just green on the satellite photo. When you look at the LiDAR, you can see the ups and downs, and you can see where there's wetlands and where there's a little higher elevation. And you can then pinpoint which are the most important places for you to visit if you are a field botanist or you're doing inventories. So you get a whole new dimension of the landscape by using LiDAR. Okay, so you also can get around in other ways. So this is by bike. So bicycling around, easy. This is camping by bike. Transportation, thanks to Eric Tepe. He just sent me this like yesterday, I think this picture. This is one of the two field cars. The first field car went over the stream, no problem. A flash flood arrived in the middle of when the second car was driving over, and it swept this second car away with all the equipment and people in it, 20 meters away downstream. And they managed to hook up a line to the first car and pull it out of the stream. So everybody was okay afterwards, but you never know. There is other kinds of dangers that happens, not just with cars, but we have lots of dramatic pictures of cars here. So you have, of course, cars have tires. Tires and cacti don't go well together. And you then have to learn how to vulcanize your tires when you get a problem with a flat tire in the desert far away. And sometimes I think Grant Godden, he said that it was one case when they had 3 flat tires in one day out in nowhere. Okay. Another thing that can happen, this is Andrea Wolf that was out collecting penstemon I think Penstemon, yes. And she had a rental car, and this is quicksand, and she got stuck in quicksand, and she had to hike out 3 miles to get to a road where she could get cell phone reception and meet the truck that was going to come and pull out her rental car out of the quicksand. So there are things, this is just recent things that have happened in this case, right? Okay. Other things, if you're going to fly, you still have to bring all your equipment. So this is Ingrid Jordan Thaden that took 20 people with her to Alaska in a field trip. This is all their gear after they're at the airport when they're about to get on the plane, including lots of plant pressing materials. She also had a picture of a plant press up in the cabin, you know, when you sit in the cabin in the airplane and you put it up in the top bin there, you know, together with your carry-on luggage. So lots of things you have to think about. You can have small wheels too. This is one of my former students. This is Lauren Frazee. She used a skateboard to get around on the asphalted parking lots of Rutgers campus to inventory the different kinds of small weeds that grow on parking lots. You can be on small places, and those small places can be very far away. So Tom Ranker did a lot of work in the Pacific. This is the landing strip on one of the airports where they landed. You can see that it starts and ends in the ocean. So you have to get down and you have to land just right. And then from there, you have to take a boat to get to another island where you do your work. So just getting to the place where you're going to do your work in itself can be a long thing. And we're not even talking about in the past, like Humboldt, Alexander von Humboldt, that took months and months and months to cross the South America using whatever mules and other things that he could use, and his own legs as well. Okay, sometimes you have ships and there's no harbors. So this is in the Baltic Sea. This is an island that is completely made out of sand, glacial sand. So here the boat itself just drive up, and then you have this airport thing coming up, and you just can walk off. If there's big waves, then you have to sometimes you can't do this. You have to get in a rubber dinghy, or sometimes in the old times, we just had to jump into the water and wade ashore. You can also have small boats. So this is a canoe. This is Raquel Bello from University of Wisconsin collecting American lotus. So in the canoe, so you're out and you're canoeing around, and it's beautiful, right? So this is one way of getting around with your hand powered, no engines. And sometimes you need to create your own infrastructure. And I put this picture in here because this is probably one of the most famous bridges, at least for biologists in the New World. This is the bridge at La Selva in Costa Rica that leads from one side of the river to the other side of the river. So this is a 60-year-old research station with one of the best investigated tropical lowland rainforests ever. And this bridge is named after the executive director of La Selva, Donald Stone, at that time. And going back and forth over this bridge, it's only walking on this bridge. And if you haven't been to La Selva, please go to La Selva. It's amazing. It's easy to get to these days. Okay, now you've got into your place. You are there, you're going to find your plants, you find your plants, but you can't reach them. What do you do? Well, you do whatever you have to do to get to those plants that you need to find, right? Or that you need to bring back with you. On one side here is a sky lift. This is my dad. He's up in the rented sky lift, and he's investigating what pollinates the mistletoes up in the tree tops. So he's up there looking at things. So this is a regular rented, things that people rent for painting their houses. Well, he rented it to get up into the trees. On the right, that's from one of Jason Grant's trips. This is looking for Bromeliaceae up in the Andes, and I'm trying to get rid of these up in the Andes. And there was people working on the road, and they said, please, can you help us get up? Can you help us get up there? And they said, sure. So she got into the bucket, and then they lifted her up, and she got her Bromeliaceae, her bromelia up there. So you do what you can, right? Sometimes, we have these clipper poles and stuff like that. Well, Bruce Holst had like the absolute record clipper pole that he made, 12 meters tall. So if you want that in feet, it's 36 feet. So this, you can see the yellow pole going all the way up. I think this is at La Selva too in Costa Rica. All the way up. You have to hold it straight up. If you start bending it a little bit sideways, it's just going to fall because it's going to be so heavy, the gravity, pulls it down. So you have to be super, super careful with this fiberglass pole. It's like a little dangerous to stand close by to this thing. And then sometimes it's too wet or too steep. So you have boardwalks. It's very nice, very convenient. You don't have to walk on the sphagnum, jump between the sphagnum hummocks or anything like that. This is David Fairbrothers and other people, botanists of the time, in 2005. And then on the other side, the two people here, this is Dianella Howarth and somebody else that was, and it's her mom taking this picture in Hawaii while she was doing her field work. And Dianella told me that her mom was taking the picture with her heart up to here, worrying that her daughter was going to fall down the cliff while finding these very special rare plants that she had to collect, because Hawaii can be very steep. More wet, more deep. So here we have Tom Givnish from University of Wisconsin collecting plants, looking at different aquatic plants, the floating ones, the emergent ones versus the submerged ones, what the ecological differences were between them, and of course surrounded by water lilies. And on the left is Torsten Eriksson collecting Potamogeton filiformis in an Arctic lake in northernmost Sweden in July. It was very cold. You can see there's snow on the mountains in the back. I had to put in that black box because it's the United States. Sorry about that. Okay, mammal helpers in the tropics. So sometimes you can use other things to get your plants, right? So in Southeast Asia, people trained monkeys. They had trained monkeys to go up and collect coconuts and throw them down. So now they could train the monkeys to go up and collect other plant parts, fruits, and throw them down on the ground, and then they would come down. And according to Peter Craig Jobson in Australia, if it says King's Collector on the sheet that was collected in Southeast Asia, that King's Collector is a monkey. That means that a monkey was part of that collection effort. And there is a paper here from 1935 that is about, collection of botanical specimens by monkeys that I put in. And there's a quote, or not quote, it's a screenshot of it, but also how to read more about it. And then you can use elephants. So I asked Andrew Henderson, somebody told me, you need to talk to Andrew Henderson. He collected with elephants in Sarawak in Borneo. So I asked him and I was sent this picture, and now I'm going to see if this works. Let's see. This is a trial and error here. So Andrew sent me this and told me that they were in Sarawak, and he's a palm specialist, and collecting palm is very difficult because they're often very tall and they're long, enormous leaves. And there was this palm that they wanted to collect, but they could not get to it. So some elephant and their handler came by and they said, can you help us? And they said, sure. So they tied a rope around the palm. They tied a rope to the elephant. They told the elephant to walk, and the elephant just walked, and it didn't care a bit about what was hanging out behind it, and just kept walking. Like it was no effort at all to pull down this tall palm tree from this thing. Oops, now I have to go to the next slide here. How do I do that? There. There's also other helpers you can have. So this is one of my former graduate students. She adopted a dog. This is Kepler as her field work dog. And his main job was, of course, to keep her company, but he was also there to bark at foreign people that would come and just check out what she was doing in the various preserves in New Jersey, where sometimes you get very strange questions from very strange people in New Jersey. So he was very good at that. He's still good at that. Okay, you can do other things too. You collect your plant, then what do you do with them, right? So you have to cut them, you have to saw them, you sometimes have to shoot things. So this shooting is to get them down. So actually University of Hawaii has still a license, a gun license to shoot down plants from trees down to the ground, because you can't always reach everything. And you then pick and dig things up, and you carry things down. What we are collecting here in the center, that's Jason Grant in this raincoat, that's a new plant species of gentians from Ecuador. And Ida Trift, she said, well, then you have collected them and you realize that they're full of aphids. What do you do? Well, if you have a microwave, you just put the plant in the microwave for 2 seconds and all the aphids, they burst up, and then you're done. And then you can press your plant without the aphids in them. So all these little tricks, you know, how to do these things. You need to protect yourself. So we've been talking about the plants, right? But now we have to talk about you. You have to survive this, right? You have to come back and look at your plants and work with them. So you need to have various kinds of tools to protect your body. So knee pads are great when you work with gravel plants in serpentine areas and similar places, very rocky things. So knee pads are necessary. Good boots are absolutely necessary for many reasons, you know, for mud and for insects and for snakes and other things. And sun, you need to protect yourself from sun. So this bottom picture to the right, that's Folke Fagerlind from Stockholm University. And he had no real sun hat, so he just put his handkerchief on top of his head. He's in Sri Lanka here. Namibia, sorry, not Sri Lanka. 1968. Also, sometimes you work on very small things and you have to be down on the ground. So you have to have good kind of like either soft body tissues or soft clothes that are not taking up a lot of water when you lay down. Looking at various things, monotropa on the right, and then looking at some little mosses and lichens on the left. And the sun can be really harsh, even in the northern part, especially in the northern part in the summer, but everywhere where you are, there might be a real problem. So this is Ingrid Jordan Thaden that is out canoeing with an umbrella over her head to protect herself, and sunglasses and sun hat, you know, to really stay away from the sun. And looking for native plants and native various kinds of rare species with an umbrella over your head when you are walking in the sunshine. This is actually from Sweden, the right picture. So even there, you can't get too hot. Other things you need to protect yourself from: poison ivy and multiflora rose. So here we have Elena Tartaglia in the middle of a giant thicket in New Jersey. We have a lot of poison ivy and multiflora rose and other kinds of thorny and not so nice plants. And Elena was the one that introduced me to the types of field work. So type 1 fun is when it's fun all the time, okay? Type 2 fun is when you go out, you do it, and you're miserable, you come home, and your husband says, how was it? And you say, it was wonderful, but it was awful while you were doing it. So in hindsight, you say it was great, but not while you were doing it. And type 3, it was never fun. And you don't want to aim for type 3 ever, right? So type 1 and 2 is fine, but don't aim for type 3. Okay, wet clothes, you need to have good raincoats, right? So in Sweden, we have this proverb that says there is no bad weather, there's only bad clothes. And I think that fits a lot of Maine people too, right? So it all depends on, you know, make yourself have good quality raincoats, warm clothes, other things, you know, you can't blame it on that, you know, with some exception, but generally speaking. In the cold, this is Diederik van Honecker, who is the biologist, field biologist on call at the Natural History Museum in Stockholm. He's collecting necra, which is a moss that grows in water in the winter with bare hands. You know. And then you have mosquitoes. So mosquitoes, we all deal with mosquitoes. Sometimes they are worse and sometimes they're less worse. This is Elena Tartaglia again. She was doing a study of moths, and she's protecting herself against all the mosquitoes that are coming to the moth lab by putting the butterfly net over her head. So not getting them in her face. And down below, of course, a blood-filled mosquito. There's ticks too. I don't talk about ticks, but ticks, of course. Snakes and other slithering things. On the right, those are leather guards, or that you put around, put on your boots, and you put them around your legs at the bottom to protect you if there are venomous snakes that will bite your legs when you walk through tall grass. This is very important, especially if you work in the tropics, if you work in areas that have, a lot of venomous snakes. So like Brazil, parts of Costa Rica and other places. And on the left here, these are Carlos de la Rosa's first field boots, which he still has, of the Frazani brand, was very popular in Venezuela in the 1980s. And so they are leather boots that you can kind of, tie up around yourself and protect also your lower part of your legs. You also need to be able to get through thickets. So a machete, there are many kinds of machetes around the world. This one is called a parang. It's from Borneo, handmade for Ken Cameron at the University of Wisconsin. And John Beeman was there when Ken came to Borneo the first time. I said, you need your own parang. Let's go, and we're going to have one made for you. So this is the one, just picture from last week. And this is like something that you use to get your way through branches. You have to cut your way through. There's no trails in some places where you go. And you want to open up and cut through and not try to lift too much, because there might be snakes and insects and spiders and other things. So you try to kind of like make a little tunnel through vegetation where you're going. And also to cut down, of course, the plants that you want to collect. Okay, some plants are more complicated than others. So you might know that cacti, for example, if you press cacti whole, they might grow out of your plant press. So first of all, you have to think about that. You're not pressing them whole, you actually kind of separate them out. Some cacti are too big to press, like this one on the left. I don't know how he got up there, how he's holding on to this giant cactus with his finger. I'm like, ugh, in the suit, right? So I can't see the name and the year because it's covered up by the Zoom thing. But this is not typical for a botanist to do this. Maybe in 1908 or whenever this was. Typical is more on the right. Is Ida Trift out removing cacti spines from under her boots with a tweezer, one at a time, pulling them out of her boots. And you might not know this, but cacti spines, they have little kind of harpoon-like things on them. So it's very hard to pull them out. They're easy to go in and very hard to pull out of your skin if you get them in your body. Okay, so you get your plant. Now you want to also plant, you want to press the plant, but you also might want to save some of the other parts of the plant, like in alcohol, for example, to bring home for a pickle collection. When you don't have alcohol, you can use Bacardi rum or some other kind of local alcohol. Bacardi is not local, it's Cuban, but Voss Cuba. Now it's American. Or you can just do other things. You use what you have and you put this in. And here's a plant press in the back of the truck in Brazil. And how do you collect your plants? So there were, in the past, people had vasculums. I have not seen anybody use a vasculum ever in my fieldwork in the last, 30, 40 years. What I see is a lot of Ziploc bags and a lot of black and colorless garbage bags. But I was just told by Laura Fenn that she doesn't use that anymore. She uses this garment packing folder you can buy on Amazon that you can put newspaper in between, and then you fold it up and you have kind of like a pre-pressed layers in there, and you carry it as just like, instead of having your suits and your nice shirts in there, you carry your plants around you in the field as a lightweight way of carrying things back. So Ziplocs were very important. The invention of Ziplocs is very important for plant people. Here is Millspo, is out in the field in Bahamas. He's carrying his plant press with him. This is usually not typical that people carry a whole plant press with them, because especially if you collect in the tropics, You can collect presses that are, 3, 4, 5 feet thick with plants in them. Hence, not in the same day, but thick presses are not unusual for expeditions. The local newspaper, when you press plants, you get the local newspaper. And when you get plants that have been collected in local countries, if you're the herbarium director, you're going to see the most amazing, crazy kinds of news that have been preserved together with the plants in this. So this is from Ecuador, this plant collected in 2008 in the local newspaper from Ecuador. You have blotting paper in your press. When you're out in the field, you have to dry that blotting paper all the time because we reuse it all the time. So to press plants, you make kind of sandwiches, like double sandwiches all the time with cardboard, blotting paper, newspaper, plants, newspaper, blotting paper, cardboard. And you have to change in and out that blotting paper so that it has dry blotting paper that pulls out the moisture out of the plant through the newspaper. So the blotting paper has to be dried in between. You can do that in many ways. You can put it in a hotel room with air conditioning, which is very upscale and very recent, right? You can put it in the sunshine. You can put it over a fire like this, or in a sunny window, or in a sunny car, for example, to let them dry out. They were in the past, in the tropics, sometimes people they put the blotting paper and put them in a salt bath and then dried them, and the salt could take up more of the moisture. This is not used much anymore, but there were salted blotting paper that were used in the past. You also sometimes use silica gel to dry small tissue pieces for DNA samples. And the silica gel also takes up moisture for small packages. But when it has taken up a lot of moisture, you have to heat it up to get it, release that moisture so you can reuse it again. So here they are in Ecuador, and they are in a frying pan over the open fire. They are heating up their silica gel to reuse it again for DNA samples. Okay, body sustenance. You have to take care of your inside of your body too, not just the outside of your body. So this is a field camp on top of one of the tepuis in southern Venezuela, the Marutani-Marahuaca expedition in 1981 from New York Botanical Garden. You landed there by helicopter on top of one of these tabletop mountains, and the helicopter was going to come and pick you up later, say 2 weeks later, after you had collected all the plants, you had everything with you. Well, they would only pick you up if the weather was nice. If the weather is not nice, you won't get picked up. And Tom Givnish told me that, well, we were stuck there and there was no helicopter and we had no more drinking water left. So we started drinking the water out of the Brocchinia plants, which are carnivorous bromeliads. So they would take the water out of these tank plants and pour it into and boil it and then use it as drinking and eating water. It did not taste good. So it's just, you do what you'd have to do, right? The helicopter came a few days later. I also asked, what is the best field food, when you're out in the field? And I got these pictures and these suggestions. So of course, canned food, if you don't have to worry about weight, you can have a can of ravioli or chicken soup or something. You just heat it up over the fire, but that is when you don't have to worry about carrying something far. Eggs, hard-boiled eggs. It's not just Colombo that eats hard-boiled eggs, but there's also certain field botanists that are carrying hard-boiled eggs with them in their pockets, and they eat it when they get hungry out in the field. Easy, you can throw the shells anywhere. There's nothing, you just get a lot of protein and you're ready to go. Apples, similar thing. You can keep it in the pocket. It doesn't turn into mush. The apples are great. You can throw out the little, core when you're done. Some people that work in Hawaii, they're like, Spam musubi is the best thing ever. You go into the local gas station, you buy 2 Spam musubi, put them in your pocket. And Spam musubi is rice with some kind of layer on top. So it's a Japanese Hawaii kind of thing that is wrapped up with kind of sushi rice plus a top layer. Could be tofu, could be other things. And salt. One of my friends said, absolutely salt. Table salt, you're going to sweat so much that you need to replace your salt balance. So you always need to carry salt with you all the time. This is especially if you're in hot climates. You know, it's not just water you need to replenish, you also need to keep your salt balance. Don't eat too much salt, then you're going to throw up. If you eat like a whole salt package, it's not going to be good. Other things. So there certain people in New Jersey, some of my colleagues were like, the best field food is absolutely the cocoa brownies that the husband of one of my field people make. So I looked it up. It's Smith and Kitten's recipe online. So you can make them now. You can make the best field brownies and bring them. They're very chocolatey and like nearly like eating just pure chocolate. On the right here is the little kit that Dietrich von Honecker in Sweden, who is this naturalist on call, biologist on call, they do this 24-hour art race, species race, where they are trying to find or see as many species as possible. This is what he brings with him. So binoculars, of course, he has a camera, microphone because he records things. What is the food that he brings? Well, he brings 2 sandwiches, caffeine tablets, and almond paste. And the almond paste is sugar and protein, right? So sugar and fats, not protein. Okay, now you also need to have time to relax. So you can't just work all the time. Hugh Iltis is in a dugout canoe relaxing somewhere in Costa Rica, actually, Rio Frio in Costa Rica in the 1950s, 1949. Or you have your little companion chair with you that you can put in your backpack, and you sit down and you read a good book. And you also need to sleep. Hammocks are good. Hammocks are great. Or a tent if you're in a place where it might snow on you, or it might rain on you, or there might be polar bears, or it might be something like that, right? If you're in Australia, you can rent these amazing camping vans that is like, this is Chris Martin's, it's like a snail with kitchen. So you have everything in it, and you can open it up and you get a tent, and you open it up and you have like the kitchen with you on the wheels, and everything is there for you to survive the Australian outback. Okay, you have to make field notes. I'm not going to talk so much about field notes because I know that other people are experts on field notes, but it's very important to remember that if you're out collecting, you will not remember everything when you get back. You have to write it down while you're collecting. This is John Torrey's field notes from one of his trips, what he saw on August 3rd and 1818. And he just says that the species and kind of like moist, closed woods and cedar swamp, but he doesn't say anything more than that. But this is one of his field notebooks. Today, we can use digital tools. I put iNaturalist in here, even if it's not so much used for actually making field notes in the field for herbarium collections. But this is a tool where you can easily photograph, get GPS, everything in one spot, and use it later as a memory tool. And also field art. I put that in here since I teach nature journaling, that making sketches of things that you see is very important. I wish there were more herbarium material that had associated sketches with them of how things looked like when they were in the field, when they looked in the field, because you lose color, you lose structure, you lose 3-dimensionality of things. Okay, magnification and photography, lenses and lenses and lenses. We have them in our smartphones now. 15 years ago, you couldn't use the smartphone to take any kind of photos. You had to use other kinds of cameras, like the one on the left here. These magnification glasses, like a hand lens, this is actually at Linnaeus Hammarby, this big magnifying glasses have been around for quite some time. So last, couple of 100 years. And people already in old ancient Egypt understood lenses, that lenses could magnify things. Lenses could concentrate pictures, they could magnify pictures, and you could see things. Well, the earliest one was like upside down, but so on. So if you go back to this, you can actually see that you see Linnaeus Hammarby both upside down in this image, the reflection in the magnifying glass. So these lenses started with large ones, polished glass, to small hand lenses, and then to iPhones with a lens in the iPhone that could take pictures. Of course, not just iPhones, but any kind of smartphone today. And the cameras in the smartphone today are amazing compared to what we used to have. This is the old macro lenses. I say old because it's like 8 years ago. So this is macro lenses you have clip on. If you don't have a macro camera on your smartphone, get one of these clip-on lenses. It's amazing. You can get really close-up pictures of things. Okay, you also need to measure things. So you need to bring some kind of ruler with you so that if you're going to take photos, then you're going to have a ruler so you know how big something is. And please have it in centimeters, even if you're American, because centimeters is what science does. So centimeters, and also you can take a little ruler, you put it in a lamination pocket for business cards, run it through a lamination machine. Now you have a waterproof ruler that you can use to put in water and take photos of algae. This is actually from Maine, this picture. This is one of the invasive red algae up in Maine. And the ruler is laying in the water in a wet surface. And if you don't know about the podcast, Crime Pays, Botany Doesn't, by Joey Santori, he has a YouTube channel with lots and lots of, lots of videos about plants and places and geology as well. But he has a tattooed ruler on his finger. You can do it that way too, right? Then you need to see small things. And if you're like Elizabeth Britton working on masters, you can bring the small plants home with you and look at them. She's the one on the left here. But there are field microscopes too. There's one in the center that Nikon used to make. I don't think they make it anymore. It's fantastic. It's a small one. It collapses. You can throw it in your pocket and have a flashlight with it. If you find one of those on eBay, buy it, because it's like only this big. And now you can't see it, maybe if you're online, this big. And you can also have a small regular microscope with you and use it in your car to look at Alan Prather's research is about polyploidy, and you can look at the underside of leaves and see if it's diploid or tetraploid in the field if you use this kind of easy setup. Okay, I'm getting to the end here. So what are the evolutionary trends that we can see in this botanical field work and gear? So the overall trend is that we went from drab colors to neon colors in everything, right? So now we have the ways to make these bright colors that we can see, which wasn't present in the past because we didn't have synthetic dyes for things. Linnaeus here is in his Sami outfit, the Laplander outfit from the indigenous people in northern Sweden. They gave him this outfit, and this painting is there's several of these paintings, several versions, very famous. So he's not actually in his field gear. He went up there, traveled to the north of Sweden as a young man, and he realized that the clothes that he had were not suitable. So he had these clothes from the other people that lived in that climate all the time. So this fur and other things, and there's he has a presses or something. He has no vasculum. We have tried to find a vasculum from Linnaeus, but it doesn't seem to exist, a vasculum from Linnaeus times. Okay, then what? So we have extinct things that we don't use anymore. So India ink, for example, we don't use anymore, except for maybe for drawing some paintings, drawings of plants. Sextants to sail, no, we don't need that anymore. Stagecoaches are extinct. Steamships are nearly extinct. You can't really go with steamship around across the ocean. Sailing ships, the same thing. Collecting with monkeys is not present anymore. So now you do lifts or shotguns or something. Salty blotters, giant heavy satellite phones that you might have had, in the late 1900s, to just as an emergency thing. Don't need it. Now we have other ways to have satellite phones, but they don't weigh so much. Vasculums, I don't know anybody that uses a vasculum. Maybe there's some people that still do, but I am in uncharted territory. So you have to remember, in the 1950s, when they went to the Tabletop Mountains in Venezuela, a few planes had flown over there. There was no satellite images. This is only 70 years ago, where there was white areas still on the map. So we're not that long ago, and we forget that. It's so easy to live in the now and not thinking about the recent past. Living fossils, lots of things are still in use. Knives, machetes, rope, blotting paper, lots of these things. We're still using paper and pencil. The herbarium press has been in use for 300 years. We still use it. I give tours of the herbarium and they're like, you use that? It's like, yep, that's what works. That's what we're using. Food, jerky, eggs, dried fruit, we know how to feed ourselves. Okay, what were the things that changed collections? So engines, having, the engines, the gasoline engines, diesel engines definitely has changed things a lot. Going up the river in the Amazon by an outboard motor instead of in a hand-powered canoe makes a huge difference. We have drones today. I didn't really talk about that, but people are looking at using drones to collect plants. Smartphones, malaria pills changed a lot. All the diseases. There's a lot of collectors and botanists through time that have died. Half of Linnaeus students died abroad. Half of them, 50%. Gore-Tex, zippers, and fleece. You all have clothes with those things, I think. Definitely a key innovation. Velcro should also be in here. Okay, returning from the field. Here you are. This is returning from one of those Tepui expeditions in the 1950s with all the things that are coming back. So it's supposedly when they return, and this is outboard motors, this is all kinds of things that are in a giant expedition. It's Bassett McGuire, Celia McGuire, John Burdock in the center, and one more person I can't remember. Okay, today, returning from the field, Torbjörn Tyler takes the train up to northern Sweden, has everything on the little hand cart on the train. He gets on and off the train with this thing and just doesn't get a car. Sometimes he has a bike with him and he has a bike and he puts part of this on the bike and travels around with bike and then put it back on. You get a lot of collections back to your herbarium. You start looking at them, processing them, getting them back into the herbarium. And you have to worry a little bit that they don't end up in your backlog. You want them to end up in the nice herbarium, organized nicely, mounted, or so on. But the backlog is a real problem. There's a lot of collections in herbaria that are in the backlog, unknown, sometimes without labels, sometimes in a giant cold room where they are sorted by family. So, or not even that, by expedition. And nobody has looked at them for 50 years. That backlog that you see is from our herbarium. Those specimens are 100 years old in that backlog. And they're just laying there and somebody waiting for somebody. So please volunteer to come and take care of backlogs in your herbaria and sort things out and figure out what to do with them. Okay, so every specimen that is in a herbarium is a story. It's a story about where it was collected, by who, and when. So this is just all text. Don't look at the text. Look at this specimen here. This specimen is the purple pitcher plant that exists in New Jersey. This is collected on campus at Rutgers at Ryder's Lane Bog, which nobody knows where that was, in 1896 by a student. It's in our herbarium. So it just says Ryder's Lane Bog. Ryder's Lane goes through Rutgers campus. That bog is gone. This is the only record left of that there was a bog with these carnivorous plants on campus in 1896. It might have been where the big Sears was, which now has just been erased to become another development, but we don't know. So this is the only little record of this. The person that collected this became a professor in plant pathology in Texas. So we also have the story of him, and we have the story of the place and the plant. And if you're interested in looking into these kind of stories of people, places, plants, expeditions, please explore Bionomia. So Bionomia was started by David Shorthouse. It uses the collections that are in GBIF, and it focuses on the people that collected them and the people that have identified collections. So Elizabeth Britton, I talked about her. She was a moss specialist, married to Nathaniel Lord Britton. And all the specimens, she has over 20,000 specimens on GBIF. You can see where she collected, where she identified specimens, and you can do many other things. So you can go in and look more in detail about it. And you can help by going in and say, yes, she collected this and this and this and this too. You can do it for your own collections if you're still alive, or somebody else that is alive, and help them. So here is an example. This is, my dad and I are on this. My dad is an entomologist. This is a specimen, an insect specimen. So this is not just plants. Insect specimen in Bionomia. It's called Coptosoma scutillatum, the soot sprite. I was out in Sweden with my dad. I was looking for moonworts in Sweden, collecting moonworts. He's an entomologist. He saw a little black bug someplace, you know, far away, not far away, a few feet away. And he collected, he said, that looks different. Okay, so I was just focused on the plants, you know, me being botanist, right? So he brings it back, he collected it, it's in his collection, it has now been entered, it's ended up in Natural History Museum in Sweden. This is the first record of this species in Northern Europe, in Scandinavia, ever. So this was 2001. 14 years later, the second specimen showed up. Now it's a common specimen in a band across Sweden, kind of along one of the main railroad lines across Sweden. So this is something that came from Southern Europe, and just by happenstance, it was one that was collected when I was out with him in Sweden in 2001. So this is interesting because this also then, by looking at Bionomia, you can also see how these specimens are used in other people's work. So you can see collection used in and find out what the different things, what the life is of that collection after you have given it away to a museum collection. Okay, so a few last things. When I was preparing this talk a few years ago for Torrey Botanical Society, I got all these other stories from my friends, right? So there should be another story, another talk about how people had murder bees, how they dad botanist in croc-infested water, electric eels, you know, kidnapped and did plant collecting while being kidnapped by Columbia Park and other things. So there are a lot of stories that has to do with field work, but I'm trying to focus just mostly on the actual logistics of things in this talk. And these are all the people that helped me with information and movies and pictures in this talk. And finally, my cousin sent me these pictures last night. This is what AI thinks that botanical field work looks like, and how really worn out boots look like after worn by botanists. So this is Anders Ivarsson that generate these with ChatGPT-4. I just want to know why AI thinks that you have to be high up on a very dangerous, you know, some kind of Mayan ruin or something, you know, with all this stuff ready to fall off, and it's very slippery and very mossy, and the ladder doesn't reach all the way up, so you're kind of trapped up there. But you know, it's somewhat similar to what's going on in real life. And then I'm ready for questions.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. A couple of questions. Well, one, what is your favorite adventure story as a botanist? I know and this is how we do the recording. So
okay, so let's do the first one first. Okay, my favorite field story or something like that. Well, I usually tell the story of how we discovered Macrocarpia apparata. So we were in Ecuador, and me and Jason Grant, we were there looking for various species of gentians, tropical gentians in Ecuador in the Andes. We're driving, it's late in the afternoon, it gets foggy, it's getting dark. We know we have 2 hours to drive back, so we don't want to drive too far and don't want to drive too much in the dark. We're rounding a corner, stops, and there's a strange plant in the ditch. And we're like, that's a gentian. It's nothing that we've seen before, but my God, it's just this tall, it's just a seedling. We need a tall one. So we're like driving carefully, it's starting to rain. Then suddenly we see this tall plant suddenly with flowers on it appearing right in front of us. So we had read Harry Potter, and the apparating verb in Harry Potter is when something appears, or you can appear if you apparate to another place. So we're like, this is Macrocarpia apparata. And that's what that name became of that plant that we discovered that day. We collected it, drove back, and we had found a new species. So that was my first First question. Second?
I'm curious, who are either contemporary or other artists
Okay, so the question is about field art and who inspires me and the contemporary thinking. So there's a lot of art, nature artists, but what I teach and what I do is more nature journaling, which is a different thing where you do it for yourself and you sketch and you make notes and you write all together. And there's 3 people, maybe more, but 3 people that are really focused on this in the United States today. John Muir Laws, so John Muirlaws has a website with free information that is absolutely amazing, books and everything about how to do this, various things. And there is Marley Pfeiffer has a YouTube video about things, Marley Pfeiffer, Peifer. And the Roseanne Hansen, there's a couple of other people too, but those are all, they are artists, but they are not artists for making fine art. They're artists to explore, to learn how to see and observe and how to develop your curiosity about the things that you see around yourself. So it's a completely different thing. It's not to show off. It is to actually develop your brain to see more and find more cool stuff around in the world. And just since you brought it up, I'm actually teaching a course at La Selva in January. So if anybody is interested in this, in nature journaling, you should let me know and I can send you the flyer for that course. So it's with OTS. Any other? Do you have? Yeah. My dad is a dipterologist, so Diptera is what he specializes. He knows a lot about Coleoptera beetles too. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, do we have other questions? Yes.
30 years ago, Derek Crow and others and I botanized on the Amazon. Piranhas, crocodiles, stingrays.
Yeah.
We did swimming with crocodiles.
I have never swam with crocodiles.
We did not swim with piranhas or stingrays.
So the question is, or it's a comment about the Amazon fieldwork is full of, big giant snakes and tarantulas and stingrays and various piranhas and other things. Yeah, I'm very meek when it comes to fieldwork risk, so I'm not one that goes out and take a lot of risks. So I try not. So,
No?
Yes, Sarah.
Hi, what a great talk. Thank you so much. For those at home, my name is Sarah Helm-Wallace and I'm the executive director of the New England Botanical Society. Nice that you came. There's a question on Zoom from an NEBS member, Chris Shorn. He says, I find a vasculum to be really useful, but they're hard to find these days. Lena, do you find most modern day collectors just use plastic bags?
Yes, sometimes plastic bags, or some people, they take the plant press, but they remove the wooden parts. So you just have kind of like the paper, the cardboard, and you just wrap it around with strings and carry that with you. But there's very few people that are, using vasculums. The plastic bag is a real problem because everything gets mushy and crushed and so on. So you have to blow some air into there and then close it so that things don't get together. And you can't really fold it up and roll it up and keep it nice and neat, like petals fall off. And it's a problem. Somebody, who was that was going to do a plastic vasculum? Was it you, Ryan? Yeah, so we were trying to design a plastic vasculum, a new model of a vasculum that would be good for today's world, but it hasn't been done yet.
That's a good idea. We have a comment from Richard Olmsted. I used to use a day press made of thin plywood and a single cord to tie around it. Yeah, I've heard of that too.
Yeah. I have one of those too, yeah.
Okay. And then Bob Wernerl asks, where do you do most of your field work, Lena?
Right now, in urban areas in New Jersey. So any roadside, any like lots, we were walking here in Cambridge yesterday and we could not stop. We couldn't walk because we had to stop and look at every urban weed and figure out what Aragrostis that was and this and that. So I do a lot of urban weeds at the moment. I have done work in Ecuador, especially South America, but I'm not a big field work expedition person at all. You know, I've collected plants here and there and everywhere where I've been, but I'm not one of those that mount these giant expeditions. Other people do that. I just talk about that. So.
Okay. There are some more questions if you want to do one in person.
Okay, there's one here and then we'll go back to you. Okay.
Perfect.
I'm just saying, herbarium supply company makes a really nifty canvas field prints.
Okay, the Herbarium Supply Company makes a really good canvas field press. I thought Herbarium Supply went out of business. They're back in business. Okay, good to know.
It's something like the one where the things fold over.
Okay, so it's like a field one where you fold things over. Okay, I didn't know that. It's good.
It's strap, it's great.
Okay, maybe I should get that for our herbarium. It's good. I should say that my students, we have 30 presses in our herbarium, and every student in my plant diversity class has to collect plants, and they get to loan a press and carry it around with them on Rutgers buses and everywhere. So we have a lot of presses being out and about on Rutgers. Any more questions here right now? Okay, back to you, Sarah.
Okay, so Richard Olmsted also cautions use white bags and not black or clear plastic bags to, use white bags or clear plastic bags to reflect light and not boil your plants, because black glass would do that.
Yes,
Yeah,
if you're in a hot climate, black will really, like, you know, you'll have living compost there very quickly.
Yeah. Melanie Shorey says, my mom and I have field presses modeled after Tony Resnick's, cardboard wrapped in duct tape with a rope to fasten it.
Okay, so that's great. So during the pandemic, Tobias, what's his last name? He did a little YouTube video about how to make a herbarium press out of what is in your recycling bin for students that, when you taught students that were living at home. So instead of, you know, being in the classroom and being able to borrow a press, you could take whatever was in cardboard, newspaper, and for blotting paper, several layers of like, what do you call it? Like Bounty, or, you know, various kinds of absorbent paper
towels
and make a little press, paper towels to make a little press that students could use. And then they would photograph their pressed plant and then this was all remote learning during the pandemic.
That's brilliant.
It's on Botany Depot if anybody wants to find out about that video.
Nice. And somebody else, Eric Tepe or Tep, is agreeing. Yes, white trash compactor bags are excellent. So yeah.
And I know Eric and others here have helped me with they should have so much credit for all the stories and all the movies and pictures and everything that they sent me over the years. Thank you.
So we do have just another comment. Richard Olmsted says, I also carry an old-fashioned ice axe with a long straight shaft. One end is a pick, the other an adze, and the long shaft provides lots of leverage to dig into hard soil, and it doubles as a walking stick.
Great.
Yep. It sounds like botanists over time.
Invention.
Yes.
You really have to use what you.
Yeah.
I know the people that are dealing with aquatic plants have all these special tools. One of the special tools is that you have a rake, that the rake has to some semi-float, not sink, but nearly sink. And with a rope, you throw it out in the lake, and then you pull it back and hope that it doesn't, the rope holds, and you get all these plants that are kind of halfway down in the water, and you get it back up on the, you know, if you can't get out there. So if you don't want to swim. Okay, any other questions? Yes, there's in the back. Oh, thumbs up.
Actually sent out, I don't know, requests for stories.
Yes.
Did you explain that part?
Okay, so I gave this talk in 2017, the first time, a similar shorter version of this talk as part of the anniversary of the Torrey Botanical Society, but it was a 30-minute talk. And before then, on Facebook, I said, and some other select people said, please send me your information and your stories. So I got like from all over to send to me. And then 3-4 months ago, when you contacted me, I said, okay, I need more stories. I need new updated information. And I got a lot more sent to me as part of that. So it's a really a community effort, this talk.
I had the opportunity of being in Labrador taken by, a plane that goes on the water. And of course, they couldn't come get it. And all we had left was onions and flour, and we had 2 months for going to tea.
Oh, so she was left in a place where you had to live on flour and onions for some time. Oh, and cream on cladonia. Yeah, so lichen soup.
I just shared about my experience during 1969 to 73 in India. We went for anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks plant collection. And every day, as we collected, at the end of the day, we put all the collected plants in a big plastic bag, just like the garbage bag, and pour formaldehyde.
Formaldehyde, yeah. I didn't talk about formaldehyde, but so Kanchi is talking about collecting all the plants and then pouring formaldehyde on them in India, tropical climate, right? Then what did you do with it?
No, anyway, so I got them each day.
Mm-hmm.
And then and we returned to our college.
Yeah.
And one by one, in the seed one, they were dried and then put.
Right. So you kept wet.
In the seed.
Yeah. So you kept them wet in formaldehyde, and then you bring them back to the lab, and then you press them in the lab. Prevents fungal infection. It's kind of stops the decomposition, and they kind of fix the cells in their original. That's what FPA is formaldehyde and acid and alcohol for pickled material. So formaldehyde has been used a lot for plant collecting in the tropics, because in the tropics, if you don't dry things, they start to rot very fast. And so you can mold, and bacterial rot is what very, very common. I've been sitting in Hawaii with Q-tips in alcohol, dipping it on mold on plants that wouldn't dry in the press, so dip. But the formaldehyde was used also a lot by plant collectors at Missouri Botanical Garden in South America. Al Gentry, for example, used formaldehyde a lot. And sometimes they like took the whole press and like put it in formaldehyde to kind of stop those kind of bacterial growth. Mary Andres told me once they were on a bus in the Andes. They had plant presses that were up on top of the bus in garbage bags. One of the garbage bags started to leak. There's dripping formaldehyde into the bus. Everybody's getting scared. What is the smell? And they acted like they had no idea what was happening or where it came from. So the problem with formaldehyde is, of course, that if you have treated with formaldehyde, you cannot get any DNA out of it afterwards. And many plants turn black after they have been treated with formaldehyde. So you have a kind of pressed black plants afterwards. But what do you do when you're in a place where you can't dry things, right?
Well, thank you for such wonderful questions. Yes. And thank you again, Lena, for being with us tonight. And I'll just say farewell. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for attending.